Welcome to the Ave SPQR Agoge for generals in training to lead the Ave SPQR Empire's great legions. In your first lesson here, we will cover how you should prepare your ancient state for warfare and for a campaign. Before I begin, if you like my channel and our great empire, you can subscribe if you wish to become an elite member of the Ave SPQR Senate. Anyway, with that disgraceful subscription appeal over, I'll continue with the interesting part of the video. Before you set out on a campaign, there are a few factors you must consider, all of which will be covered in this video. These are, firstly, making sure your realm is stable and will not collapse or fall into instability in your absence. Secondly, seeing that your soldiers are of a high enough quality to fight your enemies and beat them. Thirdly, considering possible alliances that you might be able to make in order that you can get your opponents into a difficult situation. And finally, sorting out your logistics and choosing the right time of year to set out. Firstly, before setting out on a campaign, make sure that you are internally stable. You must do this because, whilst you are gone for perhaps a few years, it is easy for the state you rule to fall into disarray in your absence, undermining your campaign, as you may need to return home to keep yourself in power before the objectives are achieved. A great example of a general who did this well is Alexander of Macedon. Before he embarked on his campaign into Persia, he made sure that his internal enemies were crushed. Specifically, he ended the resistance of Thebes to his rule. Make sure to define clear objectives in your campaign before you leave as well. Consider, do you want to subjugate a land entirely, which may be a difficult process if you and your enemy are evenly matched, or do you just want to take a few border areas? Perhaps you don't want conquest at all, but simply to convince your opponents to pay tribute to you. Either way, if your objectives are not clearly defined, you will have a difficult time being victorious. Therefore, have a strong idea of exactly what you want to accomplish and how you intend on accomplishing it. Make sure your plan is not rigid though, and be ready to change your objectives if a new opportunity arises. Or consider looking for peace if you see that you will not hold an advantage for much longer. Do not make the error of Pyrrhus of Epirus, who set out to conquer Rome, in not having a clear strategy. Secondly, I will talk about the importance of training a good army. To be successful in a very large campaign against a strong opponent who owns large territories, a very elite and strong army is necessary. Rulers who did a good job of this are Philip of Macedon and the perhaps non-existent Lycurgus of Sparta. Both of these made sure that their militaries were well trained, well selected, and not made of inexperienced levies and conscripted soldiers. If you can afford it, you could even try to make a professional standing army, but with the resources available in the ancient period, this might be difficult. Thirdly, I will now talk about making alliances. These are very important, as by making good alliances, you can often outmaneuver your enemy, as they get hit by your allies in a direction they were not expecting. Although this particular ploy failed, a great example of this is when Hannibal made an alliance with the Macedonians against the Romans during the Second Punic War. The Macedonian intervention made the Romans have a very difficult time, as they had to fight in Greece as well as in Italy, stretching their forces very thin. This example should demonstrate very clearly to you how advantageous alliances can be in a large-scale campaign. Last, but certainly not least, as this one is really crucial, you must make sure that your logistics are covered well. This is very important, because without good logistics, any large-scale campaign is almost certainly doomed to failure. Don't rely on living off the land unless you are on a short campaign or are confident of a rapid victory. Make sure that you set out at the correct time of year. Early spring is a good time to set out, so make sure that you are completely prepared and have your army ready to set out then. The reason for this is so that you can maximize your time in the campaigning season before you have to find somewhere to winter your soldiers. Speaking of finding somewhere to winter, make sure that you have a good place in mind that you can reach, where you can rely on strong defenses and good supplies. Otherwise, your army may find itself caught in a terrible conditions, surrounded by enemies. A similar situation as to that which I've just described, although it was for very different reasons, is that which Xenophon and the Athenians of the Persian expedition found themselves in during their retreat back to Greece. Anyway, that concludes your first training session on how you can become a very great ancient general. There will be more videos in this series coming very soon. For now, Valete et Ave SPQR!